Hey, Rachel, thanks so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it.
Of course.
So, I'd like to ask you about your first experience about Dungeons and Dragons. What was your first game like?
Well, okay. So technically, my first game was in college. Um, I was playing with a bunch of my friends for the first time ever, and I got, your first time playing D&D, there's a lot to keep in mind. And I think I started with like a druid or a sorcerer or something that was front-loaded with spells, and we weren't starting at level one. So there was a lot that I started right in the fire, kind of, since
Yeah.
they're not easy classes to start with. So I got frustrated and I backed out. Um, and then later on, my best friend Erica, who's also in the group, and we were talking, and we ended up wanting to do a D&D game again, just for fun. And Girls Gets Glory started out as a dumb skit we were making where we weren't actually going to play. Then we started playing, and we said, "Wait, we love this. Let's keep playing." And then it actually became the game.
That's awesome. So, beyond the feeling of sort of being overwhelmed by all of the spells and class options in your first game, are there any significant memories that stick out about that first game?
Um, no, unfortunately, the DM was wonderful, but one of the players made me very uncomfortable,
Mm,
so it wasn't the greatest experience,
okay.
unfortunately.
Well, I mean, it's good that you gave it a second chance.
Yeah.
That you didn't let that first negative experience color you toward the game. So, Girl Scouts Glory is currently one of the most watched Dungeons and Dragons shows on Twitch. And I saw on your Twitter that recently one of your games hit more than 17,000 viewers. And this season in particular has seen tremendous growth. So, what do you think is driving this amazing success for your show?
I have no idea. I wish I could tell you. There's no magic formula for when a show works, and I do have some people reach out to me and they're like, "Hey, I'm trying to create a show. What can I do?" And I'll give them as much advice as I can, but it's just the stars have to align. Really, I think that, we do catch Twitch front page, and I think that definitely helps
Mm-hmm.
our visibility as it would naturally. But other than that, we have a really cohesive party that knows how to riff off of each other, and we're a group that trusts each other, so that's incredibly helpful, and that's a staple of a solid group, I think.
Right. And well, I mean, you're the DM for this season too, so you could probably take some credit for it, right?
Maybe. I don't know.
If you're not feeling so humble, yeah, it's
I
I'm
am just one part of the group, so.
that's the very political answer. That's the very political answer. That's the clip that's going to be shown in the show. I'm just one part of a bigger whole.
Mhm.
So, you told me that your current season is primarily a campaign of your own design, right?
It is, yeah.
So, I've got a two-part question. Generally, where do you draw your inspiration from? And from your perspective, is there any difference between writing an interesting game for your friends and writing an interesting game for viewers who are watching on a stream?
Good question. As far as inspiration, I've always loved fantasy since I was a little kid. Any book that had a unicorn in it or on it or around it, I picked it up and it was mine. I grew up reading Lord of the Rings and like sci-fis like Hyperion by Dan Simmons and the Pryderi Chronicles, Lloyd Alexander, Narnia, all that.
Mm-hmm.
All of the classic staples of the fantasy genre I was very much into. And I've always loved mythology, so I draw a lot from classic ideas of what a folklore is. Like Arthurian is really fun to draw from because it is huge. There's so much Arthurian lore. And then drawing from other cultures, I love to do because it's really easy to see D&D and go, Caucasian knights running around in an English countryside, but it's so much more fascinating to me to see a mixing pot of things that are inspired by a lot of other cultures. There's a point in this Girls Got Glory campaign where I created a festival and a land that I wanted to be based specifically on the Philippines and a festival that happens in the Philippines. So two of my players, the sisters Erica and Kim Hidalgo, they're both Filipino. So
Mm.
I reached out to them and I asked them what would be interesting to see, um, and what would make good things to bring into a campaign setting culturally,
Right.
things they'd be proud to see. So I hope I did it justice. I like to see things get diverse. I think that's where it gets most interesting. But yeah, my inspiration is usually from things that I found in my childhood too. As far as making a game for my friends versus for viewers, it I don't tend to change anything. I think that what gets
Mm.
interesting visually is when your players are into it.
Right.
And it doesn't help, it doesn't hurt rather that I have incredibly fantastic actors in my group.
Yeah.
They definitely help with the immersion, but I wouldn't change anything for a group of friends
Okay.
than I would for viewers.
Well, that's great because I was going to ask you for some tips because I'm going to be in the hot seat in not
Ooh,
too long. Not too long. So for the game on the
yeah, I'm
26th.
excited.
So and we'll get to that because I do want to talk about the event on the 26th. But
Mm.
I wanted to ask you. So have you faced or the cast faced any challenges for anyone in the community because you are an all female D&D playing cast?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. There are certain sites we know not to read the comments of. YouTube can be kind of vicious.
Mm-hmm.
Facebook is usually the worst. I've seen people rate the girls based on how attractive they are,
Yeah.
and who they would want to sleep with. I have seen people say, who are they? Are they the wives or girlfriends of people who work at Wizards? And that's, well, the only reason we would have a show in their eyes. We've had a lot of people think that it's scripted, which I think is funny because between you and me and the audience, I improvise pretty much everything in my games when I'm DMing.
Nice.
I know an A and B, and then I improvise the rest. So the idea that it's scripted is funny to me in particular. But yeah, we face a lot. I would love one day to just be seen as a D&D player and not, a female D&D player,
Yeah.
because I really am. I love this just as much as anyone else who's been in the game since the 70s. This is my wheelhouse. And just because I look a certain way doesn't mean I grew up any different. I was the nerd. I was bullied. I had braces and glasses and acne and all of that, and I loved video games and D&D and anime. This is this is my community, and yet they can still turn on you sometimes.
Yeah. And I saw that there was you might have posted it actually. There was a screenshot of something that Gary Gygax said about why girls didn't play Dungeons and Dragons. And I don't remember what he said. It didn't really matter. But the thing that I thought most interesting about that point is that they created this game that they thought wasn't for girls, but now the hobby is filled with girls. And I think, Girls Guts Glory is an example of how the inclusiveness of the hobby, whether it's the LGBT community or making it more welcoming for girls at the table. I don't know if that's fifth edition specific or just the people who are really focused on making it. I had a conversation with Jeremy Crawford not too long ago about how one of the things that they wanted to do was make sure that people from diverse communities were represented in their games. And I don't remember which book it was from, but an innkeeper just happened to mention that his husband was off somewhere doing something. And I wonder if that commitment is part of why it's like, if people are more feeling more welcome in the game. I don't know. What do you think about that?
I think that definitely helps. I think seeing yourself represented is hugely important and inspiring. I mean, just look at Chadwick as Black Panther, hugely inspiring.
Mm-hmm.
So it doesn't hurt, certainly. But I also think anytime you have something that you put out into the world that's creative in that manner, even if you say this is just for boys, it was created for men, women and non-binary individuals are still going to love it. Like Conan is very much a masculine IP.
Mm-hmm.
My sister loves Conan the Barbarian. I've
Right.
watched it so many times with her, and I love it too. I mean, that's fantasy magic. Of course, I'm going to be into it. And I mean, I would love the chance to swing a sword. Like, let's be honest, I've done it before. I love combat, but anytime you make something that's supposed to be just for guys, I guarantee you other people are going to love it too. It really doesn't matter. I don't think fantasy should be gender specific. It's just fantasy, and that's what makes it great, I think.
Yeah. I mean, I think it can be anything to anyone. And
Hmm.
so the thing that I find most interesting, and I don't want to give too much away about what's coming to you on the 26th, but so one of the things that happens with kids with Duchenne is that it's a weakening disease of their muscles. So oftentimes they're confined to a wheelchair by the time they're in their mid-teens, and it's very difficult for them to get around sometimes. And one of the things that I wanted to do is make sure that in my adventure, that was represented in the game, because somebody, I don't know if you saw it on Twitter, actually just developed stats for a combat wheelchair.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to make sure that was going to have play a prominent role in not just your game, but in both games. So, and I think it goes back to making sure that people are feeling included and seeing themselves represented on screen or in game. It can make a real difference. And so, yeah, that's one thing that I'm going to try and do.
I'm really excited to see that.
So on the 26th at 12:30 Eastern, 9:30 Pacific, you're going to be joining AJ Fry, Velvet Valhalla, Tori Provenzano, and your co-star Ali Ganino for Quest for the Cure, which is supporting Jesse's journey and research for Duchenne muscular dystrophy. Before I reached out to Girls Guts Glory, had you heard of Duchenne muscular dystrophy?
I actually have. I have a friend who has it.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. And that's thank you so much for saying that, because I think one of the most important things that we're trying to do is, because most people, because it's such a rare disease, it's only 1 in 5,000. Most people don't
Hmm.
have that shared experience. They don't sort of know how it can affect people. So thank you for joining us,
Yeah, of course.
I'm really excited to have you. So, generally speaking, over the past year or two, Dungeons and Dragons has been used more and more often as a fundraising vehicle for charities like Jesse's Journey and Squad Up and others. What do you think is the reason that Dungeons and Dragons is such a good way to raise money for charity?
Oh, that's a good question. I honestly don't know. I think it's a massive community. It's positively huge. I think it has a lot of, even though I mentioned before, Girls Gets Glory does get some nasty comments,
Mm-hmm.
it's largely a wonderful, inclusive, kind community. That a lot of the people who play D&D are fantastic humans, and I think there's also, I mean, it's kind of a staple of any story, the hero who seeks to help others in some way.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not always the case. There are a lot of anti-heroes out there, but I think that's a general given for the main character of any fantasy story that
Right.
everyone grew up reading,
Yeah.
is someone who's looking for a chance to help people. And what was it? There was some comment online about how in a video game of no consequences, why do you still choose to only help people if you have the chance to like be mean to them, like in BioWare games?
Mm-hmm.
And one of the answers was because my power fantasy is being able to help everyone. And I think that's really common.
Mm-hmm.
If there were no consequences and you had the means to, you'd like to help people. That feels like a very basic human tenet. I think a lot of people are like that. So I think
Mm-hmm.
the fantasy community, watching shows like this, having the opportunity to donate. I mean, there are templates out there for how to run a charity game. I think it's just an easy and accessible way to give back and be that hero and
Mm-hmm.
help people. Not to get too sappy, but
Well, the thing that I've run charity events before, never an online game like this, but the thing that warmed my heart the most is that as I said off the top, Girls Gets Glory is absolutely one of the most popular shows on Twitch, and I reached out to the team and I said, hey, this is what I'm doing. Would you be interested in participating? And you didn't know me and you didn't know what I could do or any of that stuff. And I got a reply almost instantly saying, yes, we'd love to help you. This is what we can do. And I think, and you're not the only one, we have an amazing cast, both in your game and the second game. And all of those people were in the same situation. I reached out to Ed Greenwood. He didn't know me in the same way, and he agreed to play. And it says a lot about the community that we're in, that sort of the default position is, hands up. Like
Mm-hmm.
how can I help?
Yeah.
So that really speaks to me. And I think we're so lucky to be in a community where everybody is so willing to give of themselves for various causes and participate however they can. So as I've been preparing this event, that's really, really spoken to me. And, I'm putting it out on Twitter and just looking at the quality of the people we've got and the people who've agreed to help behind the scenes. I'm so overwhelmed by their generosity and your generosity. So I'm grateful to you, truly.
Thank you for asking us. We were really excited to do this. It's a great community of people. We're truly lucky to have landed ourselves where we are.
I agree with you 100%. I mean, it's like you, I was bullied a little bit when I was a kid too, but it sort of worked out because now I feel like I've got a shield of hugs around me
Mm-hmm.
no matter what I'm doing. So I think that short-term pain was worth all of the friends I made over the past few years for sure.
Yeah.
So, all right, this is sort of maybe a softball question. Have you
Okay.
decided what character you're going to be playing on the 26th?
I am torn because actually I was gifted by Wizards a D&D Beyond account that has unlimited character slots.
Oh boy. Yep.
So it's dangerous. Oh, it's so dangerous. And I have access to everything they've created.
Yep.
So I sometimes in my free time just go and make characters for fun. So I have to go through and decide if I want to play one of the level threes that I've already created or if I want to create a new one. I haven't decided yet.
If you had to choose generally, what kind of character do you skew toward? Do you play a melee fighter, a spellcaster? What's your sort of archetype?
I like to do damage. I like to be the tank or the DPS. I
Nice.
like to do damage. Um, I feel the most successful when I'm damaging multiple enemies or if I can throw down, the most dice. I can be a number cruncher sometimes too. I can be a
Nice.
min-maxer. But I usually tend to play clerics or paladins. Um, because both have spells, but both can also hit really hard.
Mm-hmm.
Paladins get compelled duel, which is one of my favorite things. No one gets to run from you in a battle.
Right.
I love clerics because you have a wealth of domains to pick from. Grave domain is fantastic. War domain, light domain. And they all have different flavors. A lot of people
Mm-hmm.
tend to shy away from clerics because they're like, oh, it's just the healer. No, clerics can do anything. They're
Yeah.
fantastic. Clerics can lay down a ton of damage. So I don't know. I'm leaning towards either one of those.
Okay. All
Yeah.
right. Yeah, I'm you're speaking my language because I too am a damage dealer. My favorite character is one of the Axe brothers, and there's Halk and Helk, Halk. There's a whole story, but I'm not going to bore you with it.
I love it. No, I love it
Um,
already.
and he just has a big axe, and so basically all he does is my most gratifying moment was uh, I rolled a crit, and it was 7d12 and 2d6, and
What level were you?
I want to say 17.
Oh, oof.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah. So he was
that's
he was a half orc, and he has orcish fury, so that adds an extra 2 on a crit. And he's a barbarian, so he's just doing those
mm-hmm.
extra crits. Oh, it's just so
That's so
satisfying.
good.
Yeah, it was
I'm
so
jealous.
satisfying. But yeah, he's absolutely one of my favorite characters to play. Unfortunately, I don't get to play him as much because the friend that I play with isn't really with into online play that much, so I haven't been able to play him. But I'm
That's
saving
fair.
him. He's ready. Uh, so, what are you most looking forward to about Quest for the Cure?
Playing.
Yeah,
I any chance I get to create because I'm also an actor.
right.
I love to create and I love to act and I love to pretend to be someone and I love to improvise. I'm most to be very, very blunt, I'm most looking forward to being in a game. It's just so much fun. I if I could just be in games all day, that would make me so happy. Every hour of the day. I'm in another D&D game where like at least once Saturday every month we're in a game starting at 9 a.m. and we end the game at like 6 p.m. And those days make me so happy. Just getting so immersed into it and staying in that story for so long. I love it. I could go on forever.
That's my dream. I haven't played that long in a while, but I remember a few years ago now, there was a few of us and we were playing this long-term campaign. We'd been playing it for 3 or 4 years, and we went away. We were all a bunch of middle-aged men and not particularly young, but we rented a dorm at a university and we stayed there for like a night, and we just played all night and then all day the next day. And that's absolutely one of my fondest adult memories, which is rolling dice with my friends.
That sounds like so much fun.
It was
I'm
so
doing
great.
D&D in a castle next year, and the idea of doing it in a location like that for 8 hours a day, I'm thrilled.
Yeah, that D&D in a castle. I just there's something about that that just speaks to me in such a visceral way.
It's visceral. It really is, because you get so immersed, because you can look around and I'm sitting here describing a castle and you go, oh, I'm here. I am in a castle right now. It's cool. It's like it speaks to the nerd in all of us, that like the tiny little child with the big glasses that was really excited about knights and fantasy and fairy tales and stuff like
Yeah, I mean the only word that I can think to describe it is wonder.
that.
Like, when you were 10 and you were reading those Lord of the Rings novels and you imagined in your mind what Helm's Deep looks like, and now you're here telling this story in this grand castle. I can't even
Mm-hmm.
imagine it really.
I'm so excited.
Oh man, I'm so jealous. Well, Rachel, thanks very much for joining me. I really appreciate it.
Of course.
I'm looking forward to seeing you on the 26th, and I'm sure between now and then we'll chat some more on Twitter.
Mhm.
Take care.
Thanks, you too.